Hello folks, Killer Be Killed here, bringing you another Magic the Gathering, Those Are the Planewalkers recording. On this deck, I'm playing my Control Blue deck, my Jace deck. It's not a mill deck, it's a modified Control Graveyard Manipulation kind of deck. And I'm playing Liliana. This guy actually runs a pretty tight deck, 60 cards, and when I looked through his graveyard, he has pretty much the majority of the cards that I run in his deck, so I kind of knew right off this was going to be a good match. Notice that I milled him to start the game with the Chancellor of the Spires, and that was actually a great mill. There's a grave or a Massacre Worm in there, and one of his Rise from the Graves. The danger with milling Liliana is that Liliana has two Rise from the Graves in her hand. So if you put a Griselbrand in their graveyard to start the game, if they put down a Medallion, they can turn 4 cast a Griselbrand, and even if you can remove it, which this deck doesn't have any removal, I have clones and stuff like that, they can still grab themselves 7 extra cards. So it's a double-edged sword. I got lucky one of the Rise from the Graves is in there. Now I know if I can actually get the 7 mana and cast that Chancellor, I could actually use that Rise from the Grave, so that's something to think about. But anyway, we're both kind of late decks. This is one card I don't run in mine in 1v1, Underworld Dreams. I think it's a little slow. But other than that, his deck was pretty similar to mine. I got a lot of mana in my hand. I'm just buying my time. Liliana's a slow deck, so that kind of helps me as well. This blue deck doesn't perform well against aggro decks. A lot of trouble against goblins. And Peacekeepers, a good Peacekeeper deck will get the best of it more times than not. Probably about 40% win rate against a decent Peacekeeper deck. And goblins even lower. A really good haste goblin build can steamroll this deck. But against Liliana, you have a lot of options. You get a lot of wins against Liliana, Talrand. Any green or blue decks, this deck has a huge advantage just because of the 2 swords alone. Protection from green and blue. So whenever I come up against Yeva or Garruk or Liliana or Talrand or Jace, I kind of feel like I'm the favorite. But we'll see. This is a decent game. I'm hitting him with a Crippling Chill, and I think I'm doing this just for the card draw. No other reason. I have a lot of land in my hand. Trying to actually get another card because he's starting to build land too, and I know the black deck gets dangerous once you start putting land on the board. And again, land's not going to be a problem, so I know I'm getting my Chancellor out there. And most likely, now he has a Griselbrand in there, Massacre Worm, a Rise from the Grave. So basically, I can cast that Chancellor and grab a Griselbrand all in the same turn. I think I end up taking the Massacre Worm though. And again, I keep looking in his library. He's taking about what to do. A lot of good cards already in his graveyard, so in a while here. And what does he do? Grave Titan. Great card. I think it's pretty obvious by my hand that I'm going to clone that this turn. I'd do it again next turn too if it was still on the board. Though ideally, I'd use my clone on the Chancellor, 5/7 flyer, and I can keep taking an instant or sorcery out of his graveyard. That would be my best bet, but with the Grave Titan on the board and an Underworld Dreams, I pretty much have to answer this threat immediately. And the only thing is he gets to swing first, so he's going to end up with 2 extra wolf tokens. And that is why I take the Massacre Worm over the Griselbrand. There's both in his graveyard. Generally, I'd prefer the Griselbrand. Draw 7 cards, lose 7 life, but in this case, I want to get rid of 3 of his creatures. And it does 6 damage to him. Plus, I have a Massacre Worm on the board, so not a bad trade-off. In addition to that, I'm going to have a 5/7 flyer on the board. So this is how this deck basically works. You're stalling, you're chilling things, you're stealing things, you're copying things. Against aggro decks, not very good. But against slower decks like Talran than this, it has a lot of late game presence. It doesn't fare too well against some of the new DLC. The Grin and Malice absolutely destroys it. Those demigods, there's too much aggro in it, and with the demigods and stuff like that, it just can't. Because you end up, when you mill them, you put some of them in the mill, and when they cast one, they're casting 2 or 3 of those creatures with haste. It just destroys you. Sepulchral, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Strength has a ton of removal in there. Artifacts, everything. That's another tough deck for this. A lot of the DLC is difficult for this deck, so I don't really use my control blue deck too much post DLC because everyone's playing the DLC, and I don't think this deck works as effectively as it once did. But against standard decks, this was one of my absolute favorites to play because of the variety and the different ways you can win. You end up playing the enemy's creatures. Again, we look in his graveyard. I'm glad that Myers Troll's in there. I hate that card. I do not want to discard my clone. And he's thinking about what to do. He actually makes a nice play here. He has a Medina on the board, so notice he actually has 9 playable land. He demonic tutors his other Rise from the Grave, which is perfect. And he obviously takes out the Griselbrand. So that was a very nice play on his part. If I don't have this clone in my hand, I could be in some trouble. Though honestly, I'm going to cripple kill it for 2 turns. Maybe swing. Again, I can't really swing because the 2/3 death touch is on the board as well. So this is a great move by him. He probably felt very confident at this point. I have no murders or anything of that nature, so the one thing I can do though is clone my Chancellor and snag a murder out of his graveyard. And again, look at all this land, tons of land. Generally not what I want at this stage of the game, but I probably could have tried another Rise from the Grave, get another big creature, but I just want to get rid of that Griselbrand. It's just the 7/7 flying lifelink, gives him 7 cards. It's a great creature, but I just can't have that on the board. And now he's top decking, and I have 3 beastly creatures on the board and a crippling chill in my hand, so he can't actually use his death touch to do anything about it. And at this point, I believe he backs out of the game. I think the only thing that could have saved him would be like a Plague Wind. Maybe a Reaver Demon, destroy both my blue creatures. That's possible, but you'd have to top deck that, and most people don't run those in 1v1, so. Or I guess a Mutilate would work as well. He has 9, what does he have, 9 mana too, so Corrupt would help him for a little while. I'm not even sure if that's in his graveyard or not, but anyways. I have the Phantasm. I obviously won't play that because if he did get a Mutilate or something, I want to be able to have a creature to cast out, so I'm playing the AI here, and pretty much the game's already over. There you see my control blue deck. Again, this deck works very good against the standard decks. Not having a lot of success with it versus the DLC decks. So